0411, Novopavlivka salient. A reinforced Russian tank company is rolling toward Ukrainian lines through the pre-dawn haze. 11 T-80BVMs, 4 BMP-3s, 2 Tigers, roughly 140 men in the assault echelon, and enough fuel and shells to punch through what Moscow's 29th Combined Arms Army still believes is a thinning Ukrainian front. 2 hours from now, 17 of those hulls will be burning or abandoned inside a 2-kilometer strip of grain field. 43 Russian soldiers will be dead. Per ISW's daily readout, the 29th Southern Axis will go cold for 4 days. And the man who killed the lead tank, a $4.5 million T-80BVM with cope cage, reactive armor bricks, and a modernized fire control system, will be a 22-year-old FPV pilot in a farmhouse basement, flying an $800 drone he assembled himself the week before. That is the asymmetry Russia has not solved in 3.5 years of this war. In the last week of June 2026, on a stretch of the Pokrovsk-Novopavlivka axis that Russian mill bloggers had spent a month insisting was ripe for a breakthrough, Ukraine's 68th Separate Jaeger Brigade Oleksa Dovbush showed exactly what a modern sensor and strike kill chain looks like when it works end-to-end. 17 hulls in 120 minutes, a company-strength assault erased before the sun was fully up, and a Russian company commander, on an intercept later published by Exilenova Plus, screaming for smoke his tanks no longer carried, because the standard obscurant grenades had been burned through in the previous week's failed Novopavlivka push, and Uralvagonzavod has not been able to catch up since. By the end of this reconstruction, you will see, minute by minute, how a brigade watches an entire tank company die, why the T-80BVM production line at Omsk has slipped from a 90-day refurbishment queue to 140, and what the fires cell of the 68th Jaeger did in the 6 days before dawn that no Russian commander in the assembly area ever noticed. First, those 6 days. Novopavlivka sits at the southern hinge of the Pokrovsk pocket. Pokrovsk itself is the logistics knot Russia has been trying to sever since late 2024, the road and rail junction that feeds the entire eastern Donetsk front. Every attempt to widen the pocket southward has to cross open agricultural ground with almost no cover, low ridgelines, and drainage ditches that armor can follow but cannot hide in. Terrible attacking ground, in plain terms. The 29th Combined Arms Army, a formation redeployed from the Far Eastern Military District last year and rebuilt around a mix of contract volunteers, mobilized reservists, and a shrinking core of pre-war professionals, has been ordered to push it anyway, because the political line from Moscow is that Pokrovsk falls this summer. That is Peskov's phrasing, more or less, delivered in late May and repeated by Russian state television every time the front does not move. Pokrovsk has not fallen. In the last week of June, the 29th CAA tried again. The Russian assembly point was Blahodatne, roughly 15 kilometers behind the line of contact. And here is the first thing the 68th Jaeger's fire cell noticed. Russian operational security in mid-2026 is not what it was in 2022, but it is worse than it was in 2024. In the 6 days before the dawn attack, 3 separate Russian mill bloggers referenced the Blahodatne assembly in Telegram posts, vaguely, casually, the way you mention a workplace. Militarnyi geolocated the assembly point off one of those posts within 18 hours, cross-referenced it against fuel trucks visible on commercial satellite passes, and by the 3rd day, the 68th's ISR feed had a working template of the whole staging area. 3 tank leaguers, a fueling window between 0200 and 0400, a maintenance tent for the BMP-3s, and a command node that turned its radios on every morning at 0430 for the daily brief. Vampire heavy bomber drones, Ukrainian-built hexacopter, roughly a 15-kilogram payload, mapped the assembly area at night on infrared. Shark reconnaissance UAVs, the fixed-wing workhorse of Ukrainian brigade-level ISR, tracked the fueling window on 2 consecutive mornings. This is the sensor half of the kill chain. Unglamorous, patient, and decisive. The strike half was already loaded. The 68th's fire cell had pre-registered the 2 most likely axes of advance out of Blahodatne, a farm track running southwest toward Novopavlivka, and a secondary route bending south through a tree line. TM-62 anti-tank mines had been seated along the shoulders of both. MZ-KFP remote mining systems, Ukrainian-produced, essentially a scatterable minefield deployable on demand from a covered position, were pre-plotted to channel any column that broke off the track into a corridor 200 meters wide. A Bohdana 155mm self-propelled howitzer battery, part of the Corps Artillery Group, was on standby with cluster rounds. The exact system Defense Express has been documenting as one of the fastest cycling Ukrainian tube artillery platforms in the field. And attached to the 68th for this operation was a detachment from the 414th Magyar's Birds Strike UAV Regiment, the FPV formation that has, more than any other single unit, made the last 12 months of Russian armored operations statistically unsurvivable. All of that was in place before the first Russian tank turned over its engine. At 0352, the fueling window closed. At 0411, the lead T-80BVM crossed a farm gate the Ukrainians had designated as the start line, 2 kilometers from the forward Ukrainian positions. From detection to first-round impact on that lead tank, under 90 seconds. That is the number to hold in your head, 90 seconds. Not because it is a record, Ukrainian brigades routinely cycle faster on prepared axes, but because it is what happens when the sensor network, the data link, the fire cell, and the shooter are all reading the same picture in real time. Shark UAV feeds push to the brigade's Delta Situational Awareness Node. Delta is Ukraine's battlefield management software, NATO interoperable, essentially the connective tissue of the modern Ukrainian ground force, identified 17 hulls within the first 12 minutes of movement. 11 T-80BVMs, 4 BMP-3s, 2 Tiger command vehicles at the rear of the column, which told the fire cell exactly where the company commander was riding. Delta pushed the target list to the Bohdana battery, to the FPV teams, and to the mine control node simultaneously. The Russian assumption, and this is the assumption that gets the whole company killed, was that a dawn push through low light and ground fog would slip under Ukrainian ISR. That was true in 2022, partially true in 2023. In the summer of 2026, on a saturated drone front, it is a fantasy. Ukrainian Shark UAVs carry thermal optics. The Vampire hexacopters carry thermal optics. Every FPV team in the 414th operates with a paired thermal spotter drone at higher altitude. Ground fog does not defeat any of these sensors. And here is the second Russian assumption that dies at the start line. The 29th CAA's tank crews were briefed that Ukrainian FPV density on this axis had thinned. The intelligence estimate they were working from, per Astra's later reporting, apparently came from an old capture of a Ukrainian brigade rotation schedule. What the Russian brief did not reflect was the 414th's attachment, ordered by Ukrainian Ground Forces Command 4 days earlier. So the tank crews pushed forward, believing they might see 3 or 4 FPVs across the whole assault. They saw 34 in the first 47 minutes. Before we walk through those 47 minutes step by step, a quick honesty note this channel will keep making. A lot of the casualty numbers you hear about Russian formations on Ukrainian ground are Ukrainian claims. The 43 Russian KIA figure for this engagement comes from ISW's daily readout, which itself sources heavily to Ukrainian General Staff communiques. Treat those as claims, not confirmed facts. What is independently verifiable, through geolocated footage, through Militarnyi's photo analysis of the wreckage, through Russian Milblogger admissions, in the hours after the strike, is the hull count. 17 vehicles destroyed or abandoned. That number is solid. The direction of the story is credible even where the exact magnitude is not. And the direction of this story is that Russian armored assaults on the Pokrovsk axis in mid-2026 are being detected, tracked, and dismantled before they close to direct fire range. That is the pattern. This engagement is one instance of it. 0412. The lead T-80BVM crosses the farm gate. The Delta node has already flagged it. The FPV team designated as Channel 1, call sign per Exilenova, later reporting withheld, is airborne within 20 seconds. The first FPV, an $800 first-person view quadcopter, carrying roughly 1.5 kilograms of shaped charge warhead in a modified RPG-7 munition, dives on the lead tank from the front left quarter. It hits the driver's hatch. The T-80BVM stops. That single strike does not necessarily destroy the tank. The reactive armor bricks and the modernized frontal protection give the crew a survivable moment, but it kills the driver, and a dead driver in a 120-second decision window means the tank is now a stationary obstacle in the middle of the farm track. The 2 T-80BVMs behind it have to decide, in seconds, whether to push through or divert. This is exactly the decision the 68th's fire cell had been engineering toward for 6 days. The tanks divert. The commander of the 2nd T-80BVM, per the intercept later published by Exilenova Plus, orders the column off the track and into the tree line to the south. The MZ-KFP remote mines are already there. 2 tanks and a BMP-3 hit them in the first 3 minutes. And now the Bohdana battery, 155mm, firing at roughly 18 kilometers, cycling cluster rounds, is dropping on the halted column. Cluster munitions are the specific answer to top-cover infantry and the thin upper armor of any armored vehicle. Every dismount who might have suppressed incoming FPVs with small arms is now either dead, wounded, or flat on his face in a ditch. The BMP-3 platoon commander, who is supposed to be coordinating the dismounts, is riding in the 3rd BMP. That BMP is destroyed by FPV number 7, 16 minutes into the engagement. By 0448, 36 minutes in, the Russian column is combat ineffective. 9 T-80BVMs are burning or immobilized. 3 BMP-3s are destroyed. 1 Tiger is destroyed. The 2nd Tiger, carrying the company commander, is attempting to reverse out of the kill zone. That is the moment the intercept catches him screaming for smoke. His tanks do not have it. The standard 3D6 obscurant grenades were expended in the previous week's failed push, and the Russian logistics chain, Defense Express's estimate, published 2 days after the engagement, has been running roughly 90 days behind on obscurant and pyrotechnic resupply since April. The 29th CAA's logistics staff had prioritized fuel and main gun ammunition. The smoke came later on the manifest, which meant that when smoke was the one thing that might have covered a withdrawal, the tanks that needed it were sitting in a field with reactive armor and no way to break the sensor lock. Before we walk through the last hour and the strategic aftermath, a reminder that you're watching Fury Military. We break down this war system by system, brigade by brigade, kill chain by kill chain, every week. If you want to actually understand where this war is going, subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, the final hour, and why Uralvagonzavod cannot replace what died in that field. FPV sortie counts by the 70-minute mark, per the 414th's own after-action, published in redacted form by Militarnyi. 34 sorties, 28 hits, 17 platform kills. 1 hit roughly every 2 sorties, when the sensor picture is clean and the electronic warfare environment is favorable. The Russian side had jamming assets in the assembly area. What they did not have, per Astra's reporting, was working jamming on the vehicles that pushed forward. The mounted EW pods on at least 4 of the T-80BVMs were either non-functional or had been disabled by their crews to avoid interference with their own radios. This is a recurring pattern in Russian armored losses through 2026. The electronic warfare kit exists on paper, is present on the vehicle, and is not turned on when it matters. Whether that is a training failure, a maintenance failure, or a doctrine failure, Russian tank crews are dying because of it every week. Put yourself in the 2nd Tiger for a moment. You are the company commander. In under 40 minutes, you have watched 9 of your 11 tanks stop moving. You have lost radio contact with 3 of your 4 BMPs. Your dismounts are pinned. You have no smoke. You are asking a superior formation, 15 kilometers behind you for artillery counter battery, on a Bohdana battery, whose exact position you cannot fix, because your own reconnaissance drones were shot down in the first 10 minutes by Ukrainian air-to-air FPVs. Yes, that is now a category, and yes, it works. What do you do? The Russian answer, per the intercept, was to order a general withdrawal and blame the operation on faulty intelligence. Everything in that intercept is a confession that the sensor and strike system on the other side of the field is now the deciding factor in modern armored combat. Not the tank, not the gun, the sensor. Here is what strikes us about this engagement, and this is a take that will get pushback. The T-80BVM is not an obsolete platform. It is a capable modernized tank. The crews of the 29th CAA were not, on average, unusually poorly trained. Some were reservists, some were contract veterans, and Ukrainian ground forces have faced worse. What killed this company was not the tank and not the crews, it was the doctrine. Massed armor in daylight, on a predictable axis, without integrated ISR of its own, without functioning electronic warfare, without adequate smoke, and with a logistics chain that has been prioritizing ammunition over survivability for 18 months. That is what died in that field. And Moscow has not shown, in the year since it began losing formations at this rate, any doctrinal willingness to change. That is the real story. Not 17 hulls. 17 hulls times the number of times this happens on the Pokrovsk axis every month. Which brings us to the zoom out. Uralvagonzavod is the primary Russian tank refurbishment plant. The T-80BVM upgrade line runs through Omsk. Defense Express, using satellite imagery, Russian trade publication data, and interviews with Ukrainian defense industry analysts, estimates that the T-80BVM refurbishment queue at Omsk has slipped from a 90-day cycle in April to roughly 140 days by late June. That slip is not from any single cause. It comes from cumulative attrition on the input side. The Russian storage depot stockpile of T-80 hulls has been quietly emptying since 2023, and the visibly rusted, engineless hulls now being pulled from the Buryatia depots need substantially more work than the ones pulled 2 years ago, and from shortages on the output side. Optics from Belarus and Iran are running short. Reactive armor bricks, which used to come from a domestic Russian production line, have been backfilled with Iranian analogs that Ukrainian analysts and CCS reporting agree are lower quality, and the trained welders and gunsmiths who staff the Omsk line are, per Moscow Times reporting, being lost to the front or to better-paid civilian jobs faster than the plant can replace them. The official Russian line on all of this, as of late June, is that Uralvagonzavod is meeting production targets and that Russian armored losses on the Ukrainian front are, quote, within planning parameters. That is Shoigu's phrasing from a defense ministry briefing on the 26th. What planning parameters those are, no one at the briefing was asked to specify. How very convenient, because the Ukrainian General Staff, ISW's daily readouts, and independent OSINT trackers all put confirmed Russian armored losses since October 2025 in a range that any pre-war Russian production plan would have called catastrophic. The gap between what the plan projected and what the front has actually consumed is the shortage now playing out at Omsk. And every column that dies at a start line, the way the 29th CAAs did outside Blahodatne, is a column that Uralvagonzavod cannot replace on the timeline Moscow needs to keep the Pokrovsk offensive alive through the summer. Push or scatter? If you had been the company commander in that second Tiger at 0440, do you push through the kill zone on the theory that momentum might get some of your armor to the tree line, or do you scatter and lose the assault entirely? Tell us in the comments, because the honest answer is that both choices were losing choices, and that is the trap the Ukrainian fire cell had spent 6 days building. When both branches of the decision tree end in dead armor, the enemy has already won before the shooting starts. The question hanging over the rest of this summer's fighting on the Pokrovsk axis is whether the 29th CAA can adapt inside a fighting window, or whether Moscow will keep sending reinforced companies down predictable axes because the political requirement to take Pokrovsk overrides the operational reality that Pokrovsk cannot be taken this way. 4 days after this engagement, a second Russian probing attack on a parallel axis was called off inside 20 minutes when the lead vehicle hit an MZ-KFP corridor and the accompanying tanks refused to continue. That may be the more important data point than the 17 hulls. A Russian tank company that will not push into a suspected minefield has, for the moment, lost its offensive nerve. Whether that lasts is the next question we will be tracking. 2 more forward questions to leave you with. First, how long can Uralvagonzavod's refurbishment slip continue before the T-80BVM stops being the standard Russian frontline platform on the Donetsk axis and gets replaced, out of necessity, by less modernized T-72B3 variants that carry even less protection into the same kill chains? Second, what does the FPV cost curve look like from here? Is the $800 drone that killed a $4.5 million tank going to get cheaper, faster, and more autonomous? Or is Russian electronic warfare going to close the gap in the next 12 months? If you want us to break down either of those, tell us in the comments. We read them, and the next reconstruction will draw from what you want to see. Subscribe to Fury Military so the next one lands in your feed. The point of this analysis is not to celebrate destruction, but to understand the military and human realities behind it. Because the clearer we see modern war, the clearer the value of deterrence, stability, and a just peace becomes.